Hi mga kawawmat, in this video we will discuss the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of an if-then statements. Our objectives, we will identify the inverse, converse, and contrapositive of an if-then statement. We will convert if-then statements into their converse, inverse, and contrapositive, and we will illustrate the equivalences of the statement and its contrapositive, the converse and inverse of a statement. So, ito yung tinatawag natin kung ano ba sila, kung logically equivalent. Okay, so let's start. So, before we proceed, let us define first what is a conditional statement. So, recall lang natin no, yung conditional statement. Although, nabanggit ko na to kung napanood nyo yung mga previous video natin na nabanggit na natin itong conditional statement. So, if-then statement is also called a conditional statement. So, yung conditional statement that is also called if-then statement. Okay? It is formed by joining two statements which is your P and Q using the words if and then. So, if P, then Q. Or if hypothesis, then conclusion. The P statement is called the hypothesis and the Q statement is the conclusion. That's why we have if P, then Q, or if hypothesis, then conclusion. So, the hypothesis is always after the word if, and the conclusion is always after the word then. Okay? Usually. Okay? Mas madalas. Now, every conditional statement for every if-then statement, it has three related statements, and these are the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the conditional statement. So, sa bawat if-then statement daw, we can also convert it or rewrite it into converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So, ano nga ba itong tatlong ito? So, given the conditional statement, so this is your conditional statement, this is your P, Q. Okay? So, if P, then Q. Okay, so ito po siya. If P, then Q. So, this is your hypothesis, this is your conclusion. Now, kapag converse, ang ginagawa po natin dyan is, we are just interchanging. Okay? Pinagpapalit lang natin yung if-then natin. So, halimbawa, kung ang conditional statement mo ay P, if P, then Q, then ang converse mo, Q to P, or Q implies P. So, this is already if Q, then P. Okay, so as you can see, yung from your conditional statement, which is your if-then statement, ang converse po natin is pinagpapalit lang po natin siya. So, if Q, then P. And then next, let's proceed to the inverse. So, ang inverse naman natin, this is where we are negating. Okay? Ginagawa nating negative yung ating hypothesis and conclusion. So, from your conditional statement, ang inverse po ay gagawin po nating if not P, then not Q. Okay? So, if not P, then not Q. So, negation. Dito papasok yung negation. So, this is the symbol for negation. So, ginagawa natin siyang negative. That's why we have here the word not. So, from your conditional statement, if P, then Q, magiging if not P, then not Q. So, this is how we write or convert the given conditional statement into inverse. Next, contrapositive, this is where we are interchanging the inverse. So, kung ito yung inverse mo, babaliktarin lang natin sila. So, inenegate mo yung dalawa. So, magiging, if not Q, then not P. Okay. So, ito lang po ang tatandaan natin. Given the conditional statement, ito yung conditional statement mo. If P, then Q. Pag converse, interchange lang natin siya. If Q, then P. Kapag inverse, inenegate lang po natin yung dalawa. So, if not P, then not Q. And then, pag contrapositive, we are interchanging and negating both. So, babaliktarin mo siya. If Q, then P. Pero, i-negate mo siya pareho. So, if not Q, then not P. Okay, so let's have an example. So let us have the converse. So again, the converse of a conditional statement is formed by interchanging the hypothesis and the conclusion. So kung meron po tayong P, Q, so magiging if Q, then P po siya. Baliktad po natin the word interchange. Okay, so it may also be true or false. Let's have an example. If this is your conditional statement where you have if P then Q, so yan naman ang lagi natin ginagamit, P then Q. Your hypothesis and conclusion. So this is your conditional statement. If you live in Davao, then you live in Mindanao. So this is your, what's this? If. So after if, this is your hypothesis. This is your P. Then, you live in Mindanao. So you live in Mindanao. This is your Q. This is your conclusion. Okay. So if you live in Davao, then you live in Mindanao. So this is your hypothesis. This is your conclusion. Now, for us to convert this into its converse, so ang converse niya po, interchange po natin. So if kung ang conditional ay if P then Q, ang converse natin if Q then P. Baliktad lang po. So magiging if you live in Mindanao, okay? If you live in Mindanao, then you live in Davao. Okay, so babaliktarin lang po natin yung ating conclusion and hypothesis. So if, and then dito mo naman ilalagay ngayon si conclusion mo, then dito naman ngayon si hypothesis. So if you live in Mindanao, then you live in Davao. So ito ngayon ang iyong conclusion and this is your hypothesis. So if Q, then P. Okay? Now, in this case, the conditional is true but the converse is false. Okay, bakit? Bakit true? If you live in Davao, then you live in Mindanao. That is true. Kasi pag nakatira ka sa Davao, nasa Mindanao ka. Okay? This is true. Now, bakit ang converse niya ay false? Let us analyze. If you live in Mindanao, then you live in Davao. This is false kasi there are people who is living in Mindanao but not in Davao. Okay? So, this is false. Okay? So, in this case, the conditional statement is true but the converse is false. So, dapat marunong din po tayo mag-identify if it's true or false. Next, another example. So, I have here a conditional statement. If you are a native Kapampangan, then you are born in Pampanga. So, after if, this is your hypothesis. After then, this is your conclusion. Now, so your converse, Q, if Q, then P. So, yun po yung ating converse. So, you just have to interchange your hypothesis and conclusion. Okay? So, we will have, if you are born in Pampanga, then you are a native Kapampangan. So, binaliktad lang natin. This will become now your hypothesis, yung conclusion mo, nandito, and then ito ngayon yung iyong hypothesis. This is your P. So, if Q, then P. That is your converse. Now, if we will try to analyze, if you are a native Kapampangan, then you are born in Pampanga. This is true. If you are born in Pampanga, doon ka pinanganak, then you are a native Kapampangan. This is also true. So, therefore, in this case, both the conditional and the converse are true. So, ano ba ang ibig sabihin? O kapag binigyan ka ng conditional statement and then ang converse niya, kinuha mo yung converse niya at pareho silang true, dito po papasok ang concept ng biconditional statement. Ano nga ba itong biconditional statement? So, nagkakaroon lang po tayo ng biconditional statement kapag meron kang conditional statement at converse. It's converse na parehong true. Again, magkakaroon lang po tayo ng biconditional statement kapag ang conditional statement mo at yung converse niya, again ha, converse, hindi po inverse, hindi po contrapositive, converse. And its converse are true. So, kapag nakita mo na yung conditional at converse ay parehong true, that is the time that you can combine those statements using if and only if. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, hindi ka gagamit dito ngayon ng if at then. Pwede kang gumamit ng if and only if kapag true. So, ito po ay para lang po sa kapag ang conditional at ang converse mo ay true, you can make use if and only if by combining those two statements. So, gawin natin. You are a native Kapampangan if and only if you are born in Pampanga. So, this is already a biconditional statement. So, you can only rewrite the given conditional statement as biconditional statement if its converse and conditional are both true. So, pwede kang gumamit ng if and only if. Let's have another example. So, if your conditional statement is, if you are a lawyer, then you pass the bar exam. So, you are a lawyer. This is your hypothesis. Then, after then, that is your conclusion. That is your Q. Okay? So, your converse here is, if Q, then P. So, interchange lang natin. If you pass the bar exam, then you are a lawyer. So, this is now your conclusion. This is your hypothesis. Okay, so let's analyze. If you are a lawyer, then you pass the bar exam. That is true. If you pass the bar exam, then you are a lawyer. Kasi ang mga nagtitake lang naman ng bar ay yung mga soon-to-be lawyer. So, pag pumasa ka ng bar, lawyer ka. Okay? So, as you can see, since both the conditional and the converse are true, then we can still we can rewrite or we can convert this into biconditional statement. Okay, gagamit tayo ng if and only if. So, ang ating biconditional statement ay, you are a lawyer if and only if you pass the bar exam. So, this is our biconditional statement which is only possible if your conditional statement and its converse are both true. Next, let's proceed to the inverse. So, the inverse of a conditional statement is formed by negating both. So, ito yung gagawin mong negative yung hypothesis mo and also your conclusion. So, kung ang conditional statement mo, if P then Q, ang iyong inverse, i-negate mo lang siya. So, this is the symbol for negation. Okay? Ito po yung symbol natin for negation. So, magiging negative lang po siya. If not P, then not Q. Okay? So, that is the inverse. Ibig sabihin, opposite. Okay? Opposite. So, that's why we're negating both. So, gagawin po nating negative yung P at yung Q. If not P, then not Q. So, if this is your conditional statement, if you live in Davao, then you live in Mindanao. So, this is your hypothesis. This is your conclusion. So, gagawin natin yung inverse. If not P, then not Q. So, as you can see, there's no need to interchange. You just have to negate both the hypothesis and the conclusion. So, wala kang kailangan i-negate dito. I-interchange. So, gagawin lang po natin siyang negative. So, if you do not live in Davao, then you do not live in Mindanao. Okay? So, if you do not live in Davao, then you do not live in Mindanao. So, this is your yung ninegate natin na hypothesis. And this is the negation of Q, your conclusion. Okay? So, ito po yung ating negation of P and negation of Q. Okay? So, ininegate natin. So, as you can see, meron tayong word na not. If you do not live in Davao, then you do not live in Mindanao. Okay? So, dapat marunong tayo mag-identify kung true or false siya. Okay? Dito pa lang. So, kung i-identify natin siya kung true or false, ito true. If you do not live in Mindanao, then you do not live in Davao, then you do not live in Mindanao. Is this true or false? So, mamaya sasagutin natin yan. Now, contrapositive. So the contrapositive of a conditional statement is formed by interchanging the hypothesis and conclusion and negating both. Yung ating converse, nag-i-interchange din tayo doon, right? But this time, ang contrapositive natin, nag-i-interchange tayo at the same time, we are negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion. So, yun po ang difference nila. So, ang contrapositive, aside from interchanging, we are negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion. So, kung ito ang inyong conditional statement, if P then Q, ang contrapositive natin is i-interchange natin sila. So, Q, P, and then i-negate natin pareho. So, if not Q, then not P. Okay? So, kumbaga, ito yung kabaliktaran ng inverse. Kasi 'di ba ang inverse natin, if not P, then not Q. So, ito naman, opposite naman siya ng inverse. So, if not Q, then not P. So, in contrapositive, we are interchanging the conditional statement. At the same time, we are negating both. Okay? So, if this is your conditional statement, if P, then Q. If you live in Davao, then you live in Mindanao. This is your hypothesis. This is your conclusion. So, if P, then Q. So, ang contrapositive natin, ito yung Q mo, ito yung P, interchange, and then negate, not. So, if not Q, then not P. So, let us rewrite. So, if you do not live in Mindanao, then you do not live in Davao. So, this is, if you do not live in Mindanao, this is your conclusion. So, as you can see, your conclusion, ninegate natin siya. So, the negation of Q. Okay? Ayun po. Kasi if not Q. And then not P, this is your hypothesis. So, ninegate natin yung ating hypothesis. So, yung hypothesis mo na you live in Davao, ninegate natin. Ayun. So, you do not live in Davao. So, if you do not live in Mindanao, then you do not live in Davao. Okay. So, let's have more examples. So, write the conditional statement in the if-then form, then state its converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So, gawin natin siyang conditional na naka-if-then, and then convert natin siya into converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Okay. So, our conditional statement, if P then Q, if a polygon is a square, then it is also a quadrilateral. So, this is our conditional statement. Okay? So, kung gagawin natin siyang, this is your hypothesis, this is your conclusion. So, kung gagawin natin siyang converse, if Q, then P, so interchange natin. If a polygon is a quadrilateral, then it is also a square. Okay? Kunin natin yung inverse. So, again yung sa converse natin, pinagbaliktad lang natin, QP. Sinusunod natin ito. So, if a polygon is a quadrilateral, then it is also a square. Next, dito naman sa inverse. So, gagawin nating, inenegate natin yung P at yung Q. So, if a polygon is not a square, then, negate rin natin yung Q, then, it is also not a quadrilateral. Okay, so negate lang natin both. Next, ang contrapositive natin, if not Q, then not P. So, if this is your Q, this is your P, negate natin siya pareho, and then interchange. Or, pwede kang tumingin dito sa inverse. Kung meron kang inverse, nagawa mo yung inverse, interchange mo lang yung inverse mo. Kasi ito lang po yan. If not P, then not Q, binaliktad lang. If not Q, then not P. Okay? So, kung given yung inverse mo, kahit sa inverse ka na tumingin. Pero kung hindi, balik ka dun sa conditional statement. Yung Q, if not Q, i-negate mo to, then not P. I-negate mo rin yung iyong hypothesis. So, ang contrapositive natin, if a polygon is not a quadrilateral, then it is also not a square. So, this is how we write the conditional statement into converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So, I hope nakita yung pagkakaiba. Let's have another example. Ay, by the way, so identify natin kung true or false sila. Okay? So, isa-isahin natin. If a polygon is a square, then it is also a quadrilateral. That is true. Right? Kung square siya, considered siya as quadrilateral. Next. If a polygon is a quadrilateral, then it is also a square. This is false. Okay? Because not all quadrilaterals are square. Okay? Hindi pag sinabing quadrilateral, is square agad siya. Meron tayong rectangle, meron tayong trapezoid. So, marami pong klase ng quadrilateral. Meron tayong rhombus. So, if a polygon is a quadrilateral, then it is also a square. So, that is false. Kasi, hindi lang naman po square ang quadrilateral. Next, if a polygon is not a square, then it is also not a quadrilateral. So, this is false. Okay? Kung hindi man siya square, pwede pa rin quadrilateral. Kasi, sabi ko nga, hindi lang po square ang ating quadrilateral. Okay? So, kung hindi man siya square, possible na quadrilateral pa rin siya gamit ang ibang polygons. Okay? Next, contrapositive. If a polygon is not a quadrilateral, then it is also not a square. So, this is true. So, kung hindi siya quadrilateral, then it is also not a square. Okay? So, kasi pag sinabi natin quadrilateral, it must be four-sided. Okay? So, hindi rin siya square, and that is true. So, dapat marunong po tayong mag-analyze if it's true or false. Next. Write the conditional statement in the if-then form, then state its converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So, just like what we did sa ating previous slide. So, a guitar, dito naman, given yung ating statement. Okay? A guitar player is a musician. So, gawin natin ang conditional. If P, then Q. So, if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. Gawin natin ang converse. This is your hypothesis. This is your conclusion. So, gawin natin ang converse. Interchange lang po natin si Q and P. So, if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. That is our converse. Next, let's do the inverse. So, inegate natin si P at si Q. So, ito si P, ito si Q. So, if you are not a guitar player, negate din natin si Q, then you are not a musician. So, negate lang po natin pareho. Next, gawin natin ng contrapositive. If not Q, then not P. Ito naman, interchange lang natin yung inverse. So, if you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. Okay? Pinagbaliktad lang natin yung ating inverse kasi if not Q, then not P. Now, let us identify if it's true or false. If you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. This is true. Kasi once na nagpe-play ka ng kahit anong instrument, you are considered a musician. So, this is true. Next, if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. This is false. Why? Because not all musician plays a guitar. So, hindi lahat ng musician, guitar ang kanilang instrument. Okay? So, hindi po lahat ng musician ay guitar ang piniplay. So, if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. Parang sinasabi kasi dito, once na musician ka, considered ka, you are a guitar player. Hindi po. Hindi lahat ay guitar player. Okay? Merong mga musician na hindi guitar ang kanilang instrument. So, this is false. Next. If you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. This is false. Kapag ba hindi ka naggigitara, automatic na hindi ka musician, that is false. Kasi meron namang musician, hindi nga lang guitar ang kanilang piniplay. Maybe they are playing other instruments. So, dahil hindi siya naggigitara, hindi na agad siya musician. Paano kung ang piniplay niya ay violin? Okay? So, musician pa rin siya. Hindi nga lang guitar. So, this is false. Okay? Next, contrapositive. If you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. So, this is true. How can you be a musician kung how can you play a guitar if you are not a musician? So, once na marunong ka mag-gitara, automatic you're a musician kasi you know how to play an instrument. Okay? So, we have here true, false, false, true. Now, in this given example, why are we identifying if the given statements are true or false? So, dito papasok ang logically equivalent. So, ano nga ba ito? These are two statements are logically equivalent if they have the same truth values for every possible interpretation. Ano ibig sabihin nito? Kapag parehong lumabas na true or false sila, it can either be both true or false. Okay? So, kapag pareho na lumabas na pareho silang true or pareho silang false, then they are considered logically equivalent. Okay? So, gamitin natin yung example natin kanina. So, yung conditional, true. Yung converse, false. Yung inverse, false. Yung contrapositive, true. Okay? So, tingnan natin yung equivalence ng conditional at contrapositive. Okay. So, the conditional statement is logically equivalent to its contrapositive. So, ito po yung ating conditional statement. Logically equivalent daw siya sa ating contrapositive. Why? Because as you can see, the truth values are both true. So, ang parehong lumabas sa kanila ay true. So, sabi, mako-consider lang natin siya na logically equivalent kapag pareho ang kanilang truth values. So, si conditional statement is logically equivalent to its contrapositive since they are both true. Okay? What else? The converse and inverse of a conditional statement are logically equivalent to each other. Why? Because they are both false. So, sabi nga, pag pareho sila ng truth values, they are logically equivalent. So, si converse and inverse ng ating conditional statement ay logically equivalent since they are both false. But, neither of them is logically equivalent to the conditional statement. Pero alin man dito sa dalawa, isa man dito sa dalawa ay hindi logically equivalent sa ating conditional statement kasi iba siya. This is true. Okay? So again, si conditional statement ay logically equivalent sa contrapositive kasi pareho silang true. Si converse at si inverse ay logically equivalent because they are both false. Okay? Pero itong dalawa, hindi sila logically equivalent kay conditional statement kasi magkaiba sila ng truth values. Ito ay false, ito ay true. Okay? Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell para updated kayo for more video tutorials. This is your guide in learning your math lessons, your Wow Math channel.